Max,
We're not live, everybody.
if before we get started, would anybody object to just having a brief time of prayer?
I do not.
Kill the live stream for this. Hang on, Jeremy.
Meetings hasn't been called yet. I'm sorry.
I can't kill it. Okay, Jeremy.
Well, I'll just pray for us. Dear Lord, we just come before you at a time of uncertainty and a time of crisis for us. We know that you are holy and righteous and sovereign over all, that you bring the sun and the rain, Lord. And we just pray that you would remember us, Lord, that you would have mercy on us, that you would have mercy on our families, that you would have mercy on our friends and our neighbors, Lord, that you would give us hearts that would desire to serve each other, that we might also, in times, turn and cry.
All right. Let the record reflect. Live streaming is up and rolling. And at this time, I'd like to call to order the special meeting of the Mahomet-Seymour Board of Education. It is 6:08 p.m. on Monday, March 30th. There is no one attending from the community in person, so we won't do those reminders. But anyone in the community that's watching on the live stream, we will do a couple of public comment times, and you can email to Dawn. I think that email address was sent out with the instructions for this meeting.
On here too, on the agenda.
It's also on the agenda. D. Quinley at mscusd.org. We have roll call, please.
Giles.
Here.
Keith.
Here.
Thank you.
Hendricks.
Here.
Schultz.
That one too.
Here. Larson.
Present. Here.
Hennessy.
Here.
McComb.
Here. We heard Lori real well. The rest of you need to speak up just a little bit because it was difficult to hear you. But we did note that everyone is here. This time we'll do the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag
To the flag
of the United States of America.
and to the republic
for which
for
it
which it
stands,
stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under God,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. So, the next thing we've learned is if we try to say things all together because of the delay, that's going to be a little jumbled. So we'll try when we say things to kind of give a little pause, and then the next person can start. Hopefully, we won't overlap. First off, we have the approval of the agenda. You've had a chance to look at the agenda. Basically, tonight's special meeting is to deal with updates and questions and concerns regarding the shutdown due to the current health situation. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented? So moved. Merle made the motion. Is there a second?
Second. Larson.
That was Lori. Discussion on the agenda. All in favor, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? The agenda is approved. Right now, we have no public comment. We'll keep monitoring the email box, and if we do have public comment, we've got a space at the end of the meeting to come back to that, and we will. So under our agenda items, the first thing we've got is just a general update from Dr. Hall on what we're hearing is the latest. What we're being told specifically in education is the latest. I think I sent this out in an email to all the board members. In fact, I know I did, but I'm sure there's a lot of folks that don't know. There is a committee of superintendents, or a task force, I guess, of superintendents around the state that were put together to kind of advise our legislators, our state board of education, and specifically the governor on things, issues that revolve around education during the health crisis. There were 12 superintendents around the state put on that task force, and Dr. Hall was one of them. That's been great for us. It gives us kind of a heads up on some things that are going on before they're announced. It's also given us some input, which has been great. So we'll let her kind of update us on what she knows.
Well, I wish I had a whole lot of news, but I'm not sure that I do. The school closure at this time still stands going through April 7th.
Thank you.
And so as of this evening, right now, the return date is April 8th. I think it's safe to think that that could be changed. And when that was put into place, the governor did make it clear that that would be reviewed as we got closer to the date. So he did not speak to anything relating to schools today at his daily press conference at 2:30. He does that every day if you want to tune in.
You have to write it down.
So tune in tomorrow at 2:30 and see what's happening and go from there. So we are prepared, and I'll talk more about this as we get further on down the agenda. The remote learning recommendations have been released from the State Board of Education. We got those Friday night. Our staff has just been amazing, and we're gonna be ready to roll with our students on Thursday, April 2nd. So from my standpoint, the closure date is not of top importance because our buildings are closed, but school is open. And we're going to continue learning and engaging with our kiddos and our families as we move ahead. I do want to just also make clear that whatever happens with a decision to keep our buildings closed, the school calendar stays in place. So if a decision were made to close a school for any length of time, we would just continue with our remote learning days. So that is the plan, that while buildings are closed, remote learning days are going on. If we should open back up, we will probably take a day or two to transition back to traditional school. That's what we're calling it now, and finish out the year. But just want to make clear that as of this evening, we don't know how long that will be, and it currently stands as through April 7th.
So to be clear, at this point, no one is saying we're going to extend the official closure in last day of school.
No.
How does the president's edict to have social distancing through the end of April impact the decision that we may have to open buildings? I'm not sure how we would open buildings given there's a national directive to have social distancing, which can't happen in the
That's a
building.
great question.
It's a great question, and I think that's the governor's spot to interpret that. So I mean, I think that's one sign that it could be very likely to extend the buildings being closed. But again, absent any information today, the most I can say is that we're still slated to come back on April 8th as of this evening. But certainly the president's proclamation, I'm sure, would be taken into consideration.
I think it's conventional wisdom that we will hear something from the governor sooner rather than later this week. I guess I was kind of surprised we didn't hear something today based on what the president said yesterday. But at this point, we're just waiting to hear what he says.
Is our
It will
district
not-
for that proclamation?
I'm sorry, repeat that.
Has our district considered, just for the, emotional thoughts of the students and the teachers and the parents, of making an extension beyond April 8th, given that it's likely to happen, just to give some stability to people's Yeah.
I think we're going to get this decision very soon from the governor, and I think it's best to listen to his leadership at this point, see what happens tomorrow. I don't know that we want to be independently out there. I mean, everybody's in the same boat. I understand that some decision would provide maybe some more stability or long-term planning. But I think at this point it's best to wait. That's just my recommendation.
I think part of the concern as a state is, besides driving the timetable, is also driving the funding piece of this. And the categories of days we're using, we were using active God days. Now we've got a new term called e-learning days. Remote learning days. But the problem, I think, becomes if we start acting, at least initially, independently outside of what the state tells us to do, we're not sure what impact that will have on funding.
I guess my thought is we're going to ask teachers to do this for 2 days. It'd be different if they're planning e-learning for 3 days or for 30 days. And I know Chicago has done it, so it's not unprecedented.
I don't think any of us at this point really think we're going to open up again on April 8th. And I suppose if there was not an announcement by the state, then we would probably get together late in the week and reevaluate that.
Lindsay, how does the communication work between your committee of superintendents and state people with the governor's office?
We're just purely advisory. I mean, we don't, I want to make it clear, we do not have a direct line to the governor, purely advisory, but also just to support the superintendents throughout the state. We've put together a communications toolkit that has all kinds of pieces of communication and helpful information for superintendents to use. So I think that that is an equally as valuable part of this group in terms of supporting superintendents and other leaders across the state who are on the ground in school districts. There's such a huge diversity of districts, so many different situations in 852 different spots. It's hopefully helping to support people who are in different corners of the state and also in urban areas and in every other place that there are. So that's an equal part of the team, is to support superintendents.
Any other general questions on the overall situation?
Just could you clarify something for me? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Dr. Hall, were you saying that the normal end of school day would have been like the 22nd still, or 25th of May?
It is, yeah, it still is.
Okay, thank you. You had said that school
Yeah.
calendar stays in place. I just wanted to make sure that's what I heard.
Right.
For students, it's Friday, May 22nd, and
Okay.
For our staff, we have an institute day scheduled on May 26th. We
Right.
did have a weather closure day on Friday,
Right.
February 14th. I've not received any guidance in terms of handling that in any other way other than the typical way we handle those days, which is to add it on to the end. But none of these active God days are remote, or remote learning days are to be made up. So the calendar stands, and regardless of how long the buildings are closed down, the calendar is in place.
Lindsay, have you been taking steps as to what might happen with graduation if we're still not back in school?
Yeah, Mr. Benedict and I have had conversations about that. I think at this point we feel like it's best for us not to make a decision on that. we don't have enough information, and I think we're not ready to completely rule it out. But I
But you're
think
starting to
that.
think about it
and
at this
decision-
point.
Pardon me?
But you're thinking about it at this point. In other words, you're coming up with an alternative.
Yes.
Okay.
We need to have a plan B. It's not well fleshed out. I think there's some ideas, but I don't want to get the cart ahead of the horse in terms of saying that we're not doing that at this point. It is Friday, May 22nd, scheduled to be that date. And we have not heard from the University of Illinois that it is canceled.
As far as our ability to use Cramer.
Correct.
Thank you.
Dr. Hall, can you speak to the remote learning plan that is in development and
Sure.
when you expect that to be ready?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's really under the next agenda item, I think.
Oh, okay, I can wait then.
Yeah, is there anything else under just the general information? Because I think we all got questions about remote learning and what we're doing and how that's going to work.
So I have one more question for the board. Is there any interest in being more proactive in the directions of the district, or is the consensus that the board wishes to just follow the lead of the governor on things?
Can you type that in or repeat it, Ken? I didn't
Sure.
hear it all.
Sure, I'm sorry, my connection is not very reliable. I will put it in 10. Okay, I sent the question in chat. I got the sense from Max that you'd like to stay with what the governor is doing, but I'd like to get a sense from the other board members.
At this point, that's what I think makes the most sense to do. Now, clearly, if it gets to be the end of the week and there's no clear direction from the state, which I cannot imagine that would be the case, then, we post something for a 48-hour meeting and readdress it. But frankly, I think most everybody thought we'd hear something from the governor today. I can't imagine we won't hear something tomorrow or Wednesday.
Should we take action tonight in the form of making a motion that is voted on by the board that kicks into place if we don't have any clear direction, and that would save us scrambling to get a meeting done?
We don't have an action item on the agenda. We could have a consensus plan.
I think Max has a pretty fair point about the uncertainty on funding. We are not an independent organization in that sense. And if there is some plan to fund with remote learning, we need to know that.
Yeah, I would agree.
I'm not suggesting that we wouldn't do remote learning. I think this Ken's question was with respect to having people in the buildings is how I interpreted it.
Yeah, to be honest, I'm more concerned about our staff and our families' ability to plan. I think if we're going to be realistic, I don't think school is going to come back this year, and I want families to be faced with that truth. I don't want us to be feeding them along 1 week at a time, and that worries me.
Again, I'm not the governor, so I can't tell you exactly what's going to happen, but I would be shocked if it is a week at a time thing. I think with what the president did over the weekend, to see another large block of time specifically spelled out by the governor would not be unreasonable at this point. And I think we'll see something that will set the date out there at a minimum several weeks. Is that the general wisdom among.
Here's what I would offer. I've watched most of the governor's press conferences, not every day, and I think he's deeply and imminently caring and compassionate and concerned about the health of children and the citizens of the state. And so I trust that he's going to make a decision that's in the best interest in terms of the health of especially the students of the state. He has committed over and over again to a top priority of feeding kids and families, and that health and welfare of kids in our schools is of top importance. So my recommendation would be to remain patient. Let's see what happens. I don't think it's a good idea to get out ahead of him. It's kind of unknown territory. We're already in that. I would rather, and this is just my recommendation, stay on track with the executive orders that come out. And I have not seen anything to the contrary to the fact that decisions are being made in the best interest of the health of people. Certainly that's my opinion, but that's what I've seen and listened to. So I understand the concern. I do not want people back if it's not time for people to come back. But also, there's a lot of information that I don't feel I have that the governor does have, which is from top experts in the state, from the Illinois Department of Public Health, and those types of things, who are tracking on this and who are informing him about the decisions that should be made.
Hey, Lindsay, what are you telling the staff as far as how they should be planning? Are they planning week to week, or are they making long range plans and if for some reason we're surprised and we're back before we think we are, then great, we can make that transition. But how are you telling them to plan going forward?
Well, so we're kind of in this in-between transition time. We had 6 Act of God days, which ended today, and those were handled differently than the remote learning days. You know, remote learning days came out in this publication Friday night at 8:45 p.m. So thankfully, what was built into the recommendations from the State Board of Education was 5 remote learning planning days. And so over the weekend, we met with our leadership team and thought that the best course of action, also met with our MSEA leadership, thought that the best course of action was to use 2 of these remote learning planning days for tomorrow, March 31st, and then April 1st, and then move ahead for the next to what we know are the remaining days that our buildings will be closed, which is through April 7th. You know, I have shared throughout this that is tentative and it will be reevaluated. And what I think what I think is true of our staff, and I say that based on what I've seen and what I've heard, is that they are excellent planners. They're preparing for this. They've got fantastic ideas about how to meet the challenges of remote learning days. So if it gets extended further, I believe that they'll be prepared for that. And then in addition to that, keeping in mind, we're kind of keeping 3 of these remote learning planning days, holding on to them, kind of basically waiting and just hear how much longer the building closure might be. One thing that we're also, again, tentatively planning on, and I understand so much is up in the air, and that is very uncomfortable for me. It's very uncomfortable for most human beings. We like to have everything laid out, and but there's nothing about this situation that for the last 3 weeks or month that's been particularly predictable or has made planning easy. So the discomfort is there not only from the pandemic itself, but from the fact that so much is just unsure. And this is one of those things. How long are buildings going to be closed? So we don't know that right now, but we've been given a plan from the state. We've been given 5 planning days, and we want to save some of those planning days for possible transition back to school. I can't predict now if that's going to happen, but part of the requirement for the remote learning days is that you do have a transition plan to move back into the regular school day. So we're kind of looking ahead with that. Our staff has just been amazing. I have every confidence in them to do what they need to do and to keep our kids engaged. And certainly my goal is to lower their stress and anxiety and also that of our families. So we've been pushing out a lot of communication. We get questions answered when they come in, but I have to tell you, I haven't gotten really that many. I think we stay on top of them, and then we have an administrator available in our buildings to be there to, and of course, there's people working from home as well. So I hope that helps to answer some of those questions.
Right. I think, and just my perspective, I'm assuming that the teachers realize what's in front of them at this point. But say that, all right, we just need to be planning for this through the end of the year. And then if for some reason we get early, then great. But just so the teachers, I mean, like I said, I feel like it's pretty well known at this point that it's would be highly unlikely to be back before the end of the school year. Possible, I guess, but highly unlikely. That the teachers just need to be prepared for that fact. Now, I will say from the conversations I've had with people in Champaign, socially distant by telephone, but their teachers have not had any guidance at all. Like even the review work that we had last week that my kids were doing and had from our teachers, I feel like we're really well prepared. Some of the teachers that I talked to in Unit 4 said that they were being reprimanded even for making contact with students last week. So I feel like we're pretty far ahead of our neighbors at this point, and I trust that our teachers have been planning, but I just want to make sure that they're planning far out in advance, recognizing that probably a good chance we're not going to get back to school.
I've tried to be forthright and straightforward and say that the return date of April 8th is tentative, and after that we don't know. So that's been my mantra. And again, knowing our staff, they've been amazing and have been prepared for the Act of God days. And I think the next 2 days are going to be very, very productive. We're doing an all-staff meeting tomorrow over virtually, so we'll see what that's like. And Dr. Rummel and Mrs. Northrup and myself are available to answer questions of staff and hopefully, have them feel comfortable moving ahead. I want to just, I'm just going to be really candid though. This is all new. I mean,
Yeah.
So I also want to assure our staff that it's okay to feel really uncomfortable and have discomfort about trying something new. And that's absolutely okay. And we're here to support each other because remote learning is not what we do normally. And so there's so many new and different aspects to it that the message I want our staff to have is that we're going to, as we always do in this district, serve and support our students with our best efforts. And I have every confidence that that's going to turn out really well. But it nonetheless is scary, uncomfortable, stressful, and produces anxiety when you do anything new. I mean, I just listened to a great podcast by Brene Brown on this topic, and I would recommend it to anybody about trying new things. And it really encapsulates the fact that it's just uncomfortable, but we've got to put our heads down and persevere, and we just have an amazing staff and leaders in our building. So I'm not saying there's not going to be mistakes made. There will be, absolutely. But I've seen nothing but grace and patience from our parents and our community, tremendous support, and that's how we need to proceed ahead and continue in that manner.
We're kind of bleeding into the next agenda item, which is our response and student learning. Do we want to just stay on the student learning track at this point?
Whatever the board would like to do.
Okay.
I can go into remote learning planning days and remote learning days. And
Is everybody comfortable at this point in moving on into remote learning and learning more about that?
Yes, and I have some questions when we get on that, just that have been addressed to me. So,
okay.
All right.
So, like I said, the State Board of Education released remote learning recommendations guidance on Friday evening, and I was very pleased with the plan, and I just want to say that this plan involved the input of 63 different people, led by our state superintendent, Dr. Carmen Ayala. She's been a total class act through this whole thing and has just done a tremendous job. So the fact that a coherent, cohesive plan emerged with 63 people contributing to it, it was put together in less than 2 weeks. Stakeholders from all over the state, representing labor, representing management, representing all different sizes and types of school districts. If you can imagine that diversity of viewpoint coming together, and it actually produced a viable, real document that I think has excellent, the content is excellent. I did forward this to the board. It is over 60 pages long. I wouldn't expect everybody to read all of it, but there's some things that really stand out in this plan that to me are very important that we've been extending to our staff here in the school district. And that is that everybody's health is a top priority. And the health of our students and families is a top priority, as is staying engaged with our students and families. And then clear communication about all of this is also a priority. And so the health and welfare of our students and families is weaved throughout this plan. And that clearly is a top priority in terms of helping our children through what could very well be a traumatic situation for some of our students when this ends. Our students are going to have all kinds of different experiences with remote learning and just with the pandemic and everything that's going on. And we know that when the time comes to reconvene as school teams, that's a whole other set of planning that we're going to need to do to figure out, strategize, and problem solve around supporting our students and families once we do come back. So using these recommendations, our leadership team talked this weekend, and this morning, Dr. Rummel got together the DIRT committee, and DIRT stands for District Instructional Review Team. And they met, I believe, for about 2 hours this morning, virtually, of course, and discussed some issues and questions within the plan. We're going to follow up that tomorrow, as I said, at 9 o'clock with a meeting. It's for our whole staff. The remote learning days plan is going to be a main topic of that meeting, but the staff meeting is open to any staff, and we're happy to answer any questions or talk to any concerns that people might have. And we will get the finalized plan out to our teachers and then to our parents as well tomorrow. I know that's a very short turnaround time, but that's what we were given. And you know, I feel very confident about what we're putting out, but I also just want to say it's new. And we're gonna do our best job at it, but there might be some rough patches. But our teachers are there to support our students and as our administrators. So another key part of the remote learning recommendations is that no harm be done to any student through any remote learning days. And that certainly was a topic of discussion this morning. I was not in the DIRT team meeting, but that is a part of these recommendations that really shines through, that our students should not be hurt academically through remote learning. And so what that looks like is if students are not making progress, we're not going to be issuing Fs, we'll issue incompletes. We're fully aware that, or we might even do some classes pass-fail, but no one's going to go backwards during the fourth quarter as a result of remote learning days. And philosophically, we believe that's what's best for our students. This is not a full day of school. We're also asking our teachers to focus on two main bodies of knowledge or concepts for the remainder of the year. In the time that was going to be devoted to remote learning each day, there's no possible way to cover the content that would normally be covered in a 6 or 7 hour school day sitting, you know, present in a classroom with a teacher. So, you know, there's kind of some things that we have to wrap our head around that makes remote learning obviously very different than sitting in a classroom with a teacher. Our teachers are working on the recommended length of time that is developmentally appropriate. It's obviously very, very different for pre-K than it is for high school. And so that is information that will come out, as will be, you know, how to contact and be in contact with a teacher. I'll be honest, I have not read the plan specific to our district. I will see it tomorrow. And but I have every confidence that with the voice of our teachers from the DIRT team and being led by Dr. Rummel, that it's going to be a viable, rich plan, and we will get it out on our website. As that is also a requirement of the remote learning days that we've been given. So I'm happy to answer any questions. If I know the answer, I'm happy to share that.
You mentioned that we would focus on a couple concepts or a couple bodies of learning. Is it safe to assume that will be consistent within grade level? Like in third grade, here's the concepts we're going to work on.
Yeah. And so those are the types of conversations that we go on over the
Hey,
next
Lori, can you mute yourself if you're going to type? I'm sorry. I can hear you're typing, but I'm having a hard time hearing the
Yes,
room.
sure.
So do you mind muting? I'm sorry.
Absolutely
Thank you so
no.
much.
Trying.
No, we want consistency and equity and equal access. And so again, that's what the planning days are, not only about content, but just about delivery and what it's going to look like, and teachers being able to collaborate.
Yeah. So there'll be
How do we plan on rolling out our expectations to the students and to the parents so that they understand what that means in terms of, are we just giving the grades that students had at the end of the third quarter and that becomes their semester grade? What's the expectation about work being turned in? What happens if people don't have access or having internet issues? What's the expectation about work being turned in? When will that communication come out for students and parents so that we're notifying them of what?
Hopefully tomorrow, latest on Wednesday. I also plan on doing another video that will outline some of those things. people don't want to watch a 15-minute video, I get that, but I think that it's going to have to be rolled out via email mostly.
I put those in my group chat that I was writing. Thank you.
So one other thing I want to emphasize throughout this plan is that it is a top priority of ours, and I think it's also very evident in the recommendations from the state board that connecting and staying engaged with every student is a huge part of this plan. And I know that our principals have and teachers have discussed about making sure that every kid is connected with, and if we have kids that we're not able to do that with, then we will find other ways to personally connect to make sure that they're aware, they're engaged. Our district is no different from many school districts in the state, and that's why putting together one plan for so many school districts that have so many vast disparities with technology and connectivity, I mean, having one plan is really difficult. But like most districts, we know that there are connectivity issues in some places. There are just disengagement issues. We have families that just aren't engaged with the school district, and that happens. And
What
so
are some of the things we're doing on the connectivity piece?
So we have mobile hotspots that we've been checking out. We've had parents contacting us and saying, "Hey, I need a mobile hotspot." We might have some of those left. I'm not sure, but we're almost. Last I checked, we were almost out of them. So that's good. We want those out into the hands of folks. Jared, we have 1 or 2 buses. We have 2 buses that are equipped with Wi-Fi now, and we can park them, and that can be also a hotspot. So we've done that. Just recently got those equipped. And then the other thing too is that our wireless is accessible through the parking lots of our school district, and so we want to get that word out too. I understand it's not ideal, but that is a possibility as well. But we absolutely need to hear from people too if connectivity is an issue.
And we'll let families know where we're going to park the bus house.
Yes, yeah.
For any family who doesn't have internet connectivity right now, MediaCom does offer right now a free connectivity for families who are free and reduced. They typically during normal time they will do a check to see if they are free and reduced. They are waiving those restrictions right now. So for any family member who does not have connectivity via MediaCom, you can get a hold of them and they will sign that up, and we can share that information out to our community as well.
Good.
Can we look into getting more hotspots for our rural families who, otherwise maybe using their own data connection?
So
You'll let Jared answer.
Yeah, there's about a 3-month backlog on hotspots at this moment.
I got a text message from Verizon the other day that I had free data through the end of the month. I don't know, Jared, if there's any way to check with, most everybody has a cell phone, but they probably don't have unlimited data plans. And if Verizon's offering unlimited data through the end of the month, through the end of April, then that would be great. But we need to check on AT&T and whatever other providers people might have if we're out of hotspots.
Most carriers have waived their data restrictions so AT&T, Verizon, Sprint, they've all pretty much waived their data restrictions. So you should be able to have a hotspot on your device if you have a current cell phone plan.
I just did get some feedback from Dr. Rummel that I want to share, and she said that they are working on modifying curriculum in the year. So just in case, that is the kind of the vision here at this point. May or may not need
probably something, like some kind of communication going out to parents that kind of cover all of the internet connectivity things, check your cell plan, see if caps have been lifted.
Mediacom if you don't have it.
Mediacom, if you don't have it, and you're free to reduce lunch, they're gonna install it and not charge you.
Yeah, it's free install, free everything.
Free everything?
Yep.
Okay.
And then once this thing passes, then it goes down to, I think, $9 or $10 a month.
Okay.
So,
And we'll let everybody know that, we'll let everybody know we're gonna park, where we decide we're gonna park the buses. Okay. Good.
What is the range of a bus that's parked in terms of people being able to access that wireless?
it's about a parking lot, so if you were to look at, the parking lot here in Middletown, it would cover the entire parking lot. That's about as far as we'll get it.
I'm very grateful that you're developing this whole learning plan. Dr. Hall, do you intend to bring this to the board before releasing it to the public and the staff?
No. It does not need board approval. I mean, I'm happy to share it with you. It doesn't need approval. I'm happy to send it to you, but time is of the essence here to get it going.
I would
What
like
about
to,
our collective bargaining groups? Are you going to bring it to them first?
They're on the DIRT team, and we've been in communication with the MSCA presidents, and they're aware of the plan. They have the plan. The teachers have the plan.
My understanding is the board and the collective bargaining units need to mutually agree on this.
No, they don't. But the voice of the stakeholders has been included.
MSCA has been very, very involved, very helpful, very supportive.
that's what I was told today.
I know.
Mhm.
I think it's part of the executive order. Do I have that wrong?
I can't hear you, Ken. Go ahead again.
I believe it's one of the conditions on the executive order where it's talking about the remote learning plans that the
Actually, Ken, it says that you don't have to have approval of the board for remote learning days for this time. That's actually in the executive order, but they need the approval of the ROE, but not the local board for the remote plan. Not the curriculum, but the remote plan.
I'll see if I can find it.
It doesn't need board approval. Previously, e-learning plans needed a public hearing, board approval, I believe approval from the regional superintendent, and that has been waived because we're under a tight timeline to push this out.
I don't know if you all heard that. There's a difference between what was originally required under e-learning and then what has been enacted under these remote learning days. A lot of the levels of approval and all that have been waived in order to streamline this and get it out. Otherwise, we'd have school districts where this would be tied up for a long time. And of course, the goal is for all the districts to get it out and going this week. So they went back and lifted a lot of that.
I'd like to thank the
Go ahead,
present
Lori.
and the past. I'd like to thank the present board and the past board and the Mahomet-Seymour Education Foundation for funding all these Chromebooks, because they've enabled us to work with these 3 through 12 that many districts are doing paper packets. So thank you to everybody for that.
Good point.
My concerns sort of go along a little bit with what Jeremy had said, that I have a concern for our teachers, mainly because they're such teachers. And as I see them addressing these issues, they are going gung-ho and doing lots of great things. My concern is that they're going to get burned out, or they're not going to, this is a lot harder than it seems. And all these great ideas, I just want to really pick up the message to teachers that this doesn't have to be like the greatest thing that's ever been done since sliced bread, right? That they should do what they can do. But I don't want to add this extra stress on them to think this has to be super awesome. Like, like every one of our teachers wants to do, right? So I just want to give a message that they're have to do. I don't know if I'm.
I think we've been conveying that message all along. The teacher stress and anxiety level has been very much considered. Also, the fact that many of them are also at home with their own
Parenting.
children.
Yeah.
Right, so they might be doing e-learning for another district, remote learning. They might have infants at home. And so in the old, when I say old, in the former situation with e-learning plans that districts could have had approved for use on school closure days for weather, 5 hours of instruction was required in those plans. That is not required here. I mean, and in the remote learning recommendations from the state board, there's a whole section about the consideration that of the stress our families are under and the stress that our teachers are under. So that's conveyed from the leadership at the top of the state board, and I feel that we've really here been trying to stress that as well, that the health of our staff and their family is of top importance. I've sent that out in multiple emails with that being the top priority. It remains the top priority, and I want our teachers to hear that they need to do their best under some really difficult conditions and care for themselves and their family.
Lindsay, in the next 2 weeks or so, I think we are going to have more people who might be affected by this. What part of the plan outlines what happens when we have teachers who either get sick and are unable to work, or have children who get sick and they have to caretake them, or who have parents who get sick and are required to do some caretaking? What is the plan for those classes and those kids when we start having staff affected by their, this is not a normal situation where it's a snow day and everybody's home. We are going to have some impact here with people having potentially not the ability to do their job for various circumstances. So do we have a part of a plan that answers those contingencies?
Yeah, absolutely. And so the plan is we're going to have to take those things on a case-by-case basis, just depending on what the situation is, how sick someone is, how long they might be out. For a small amount of time, we can have another teacher cover that. We can even bring in a sub. So it is largely going to be dependent on the situation that the individual person is in. We don't want them continuing if they can't or if they're sick. So we've talked about that, but I think there are so many different situations that could come up. We just need to handle it on a case-by-case basis, and we'll problem solve through those. But I feel like we have adequate coverage. We've got, in some cases, we have interventionists that could jump in, and the teams of teachers at grade levels and at the junior high in particular are developing their coverage plans like internally. So that's our plan at this point. Great question. I mean, someone's probably it's likely, we're gonna have people get sick.
And that's the other unknown is to what level are we going to deal with that? We don't know. We could be covering one or two teachers, or we could be covering a whole more.
I appreciate that question, and I appreciate that and I think you'll go over that, but that you had a contingency plan in place for some of the administration to start with. So I appreciate that thinking, and I like Megan's going along with, what do we do with the other people? So thank you for that.
To that end, are the teachers considering rolling out curriculum on a more than a day-to-day basis? So if you were to roll something out a week at a time, I think the expectations for parents and kids and planning might be a little bit easier. And then if we do have teachers who get sick, then it's not a day-to-day type of response that's required coverage. Have we, since I haven't seen the plan, I don't know what the rollout is, if it's a day-by-day type of thing or if it's a week at a time type of plan.
I have to be honest, I'm not sure of that. So Dr. Romo is listening and maybe she can respond to what the rollout is.
I was in that meeting and
I'll let you know. What?
at a time. I was in that meeting and they were planning it for a week at a time.
Thank you.
There you go. Any other questions on remote
Can I
learning?
ask, the question that I hear most from people in the community, which you will not be surprised, is about student grades. And Lori asked this question a bit ago. Saying that students aren't going to be hurt, does that mean that whatever their grades were at the end of the third quarter is the grade that they will get for the semester at the high school?
No.
What does
Remote learning days could potentially help a student's grade.
Oh, so it could increase, but could their grades decrease from what they had at the quarter?
No.
That's the question that most people are asking me.
Sure.
And I know that this morning that pre-K through 8th won't have grades, so it doesn't affect that, but the high school.
Yeah, so that's information that we'll be getting out to parents. Those are excellent questions, and those are the kinds of topics that the DIRT group discussed this morning.
Yeah. So the guideline is nobody gets hurt by remote learning. That doesn't mean they can't get help by remote learning from a grade standpoint.
Question wrong. It's the minimum that you would get what you had at the quarter, but you could do better.
There you go. That seems to be the correct answer.
And Nicole, Dr. Rummel did say there are aspects of this that they are still working on. So it is an immensely complicated question, especially for high school kiddos. And we want to do right by our kids and do what's fair, taking into consideration that remote learning days are, again, not the same as our regular thing.
Have they made a ruling yet about driver's education?
I don't have any specific information about driver's ed. I have been asked if we can start behind the wheel, and the answer is no.
Right, I was thinking more of the 30 days or 30 hours of classroom instruction that's required for the students if that could be e-learned.
Yeah, so some options with that would be, we might be able to catch up in the summer, and we might just have to catch up in the fall, but there's obviously a lot that's unknown about even being able to do that, so it's a good question. I have not seen any specific guidance about that.
So I linked the emergency rules document that I was talking about in the chat. And if you're not familiar with it right now, that's fine. Maybe you can just email us, but I want to make sure we're going to be okay with our collective bargaining agreement.
It was hard to understand your question. You were pretty muffled, but I think it was, are we going to be okay and operate within the bounds of our collective bargaining agreement? Is that basically the question?
Right. There's a rule in the emergency rules about mutually agreeing with our collective bargaining units on the remote learning plan.
So I want to again emphasize that our bargaining unit is represented on the DIRT team. And in discussing this process of developing a remote learning plan, our union co-presidents were in agreement with the process of going to the DIRT team.
Okay.
Does that fulfill the requirement, though, that the board has to come to? The board is not represented on that dirt team. So I think if I
Yes,
understand Ken's
Colleen is on
question
the
is,
dirt team. Mrs. Schultz is on the dirt team.
yes, my question is, because she can't speak as the board has to vote as a whole. Is there a requirement for the board to have a unified voice and speak as the board to this with the collective bargaining team,
No,
with the union? We do not have to.
no.
Okay.
Not under the latest guidelines that just came out.
So I want to just real quick go back to driver's ed. The state has approved remote learning for the classroom portion of driver's ed. But you can't really do that with behind the wheel, so.
No,
Yes,
clearly.
that's speed very well.
We could do behind the wheel remote as like a video game, but that probably doesn't do it.
We can do it with us.
We need drivers.
Before we move into another topic under current response, are there any other questions on learning?
We should just expect to see more of the information, the details come out tomorrow. Is that correct? And then if you could share the e-learning plan with the board, as you mentioned earlier, Lindsay, that would be great.
Absolutely.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
I thought you said Wednesday. I'm sorry.
I said tomorrow or Wednesday, but I think
Okay.
tomorrow is more likely.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. The next item I've got under current response is food distribution. I know that's something we've been very concerned about from the beginning. The county was concerned about, the governor's been hitting on that. And I know it's been something that we put into effect immediately. Dr. Hall, can you give us an update on food distribution?
We are continuing with food distribution from, on a daily basis from Lincoln Trail and Middletown Prairie, as well as delivering to some families who need that. So that continues and will continue for the duration of the time that our buildings are closed. We've also paired that with the availability of for our families to pick up food at Mom's Pantry at the same time, 10 to noon, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday this week, and we'll just reassess that as we move forward. We're also delivering food to families through the Give Me 5 food program. Lori, I don't know if you can speak to how much has been delivered.
So yeah, so we delivered 163 bags Friday to administrators, helped with that, and that is a 20% increase for the school normal drive that we have of that. So that was great, able to do that, and we used the activities bus to do that.
We just a shout out and a huge thank you for the generous donations to the Give Me 5 food program. Some of that will be channeled also to Mom's Pantry, but it's just been amazing. So thank you to our community for.
For those who don't know, where is Mom's Pantry?
Mom's Pantry is located in the care center in the building behind the high school.
And what's our level like as far as food there at this point?
I can tell you that we were pretty well stocked last week, but I know that we've been giving out food, so I don't want to give an inaccurate answer on that. But if we're low, we will get restocked because we do have some funds for that. In terms of the bigger picture and casting a wider net on food distribution, I've been working with a group of leaders in our community to talk about how that need could grow and expand as we move further into this crisis. And we've been preparing for some greater amounts of food distribution. And our village president, Sean Widener, has been working with some distributors to get food in bulk. And so we are looking at planning just a higher, bigger level of food distribution that casts a wider net beyond just Mahomet-Seymour kids and families. So more information will be coming out on that, but I'm just really proud of the proactive approach here and coming together to talk about how we can help as many people as possible in our communities. The economic impact of this is going to start to hit and unroll as more and more people either lose their jobs or just find their hours cut back, or any number of circumstances.
Has there been any discussion about thinking about the food distribution more on a weekly timeline, just to minimize contact points? Day-to-day distribution is awesome, but if we went to a weekly distribution, could we minimize the number of contact points and number of times people have to come out in order to get that food?
Yeah, we've talked about that, and you know, there's pros and cons, I guess, with any number of days that we pick. Certainly, distributing food a week at a time minimizes contact. There's also, though, that the need for refrigeration of some of the items that we're giving out. So we would, you know, I assume that that's a possibility for our families. It might not be for some families. Keeping in mind that every child gets 2 meals a day, that's going to be 10 meals for one child. And as an example, we have people who are essentially caring for other people's children in their home, and we get requests for upwards of 7, 8, 9, 10 kids. So doing the math, that's an awful lot of meals to distribute in a kind of a week's period of time. I feel like the day-to-day thing has been effective. We could certainly reevaluate that. I think a week at a time just might be a challenge for our food service, just in terms of, I mean, they literally put all the bags out, fill them up, load them, and it's an awful lot to hand over to families as well. But I look to them they're the food preparation and food sanitation experts, and also, you know, just getting input from them on what would be the best course of action.
I think if you've got multiple kids and they're picking up multiple meals, you start stacking them too many days and you get around a refrigerator space in homes.
It's fresher if it's day-to-day too, so, but we can reevaluate moving forward.
Yeah, and maybe at some point we'll go every other day.
It was just a question because I know contact point is one of the things that people are talking about in terms of minimizing. So if it's not something that we can do, I just didn't know if that discussion had been.
What about popping trunks and they just put the bags in the trunk? That way there's no contact. Just a thought.
Well, then, I mean, yeah, we could do that.
They do that some places, I hear. Anything else on food distribution? Other areas we're helping the community. We've already talked about the tie-in with the village and looking ahead on potential broader need for food. Is there anything else we're doing?
Yeah, we loaned 5 3D printers to a company that is my understanding is headquartered in Virginia, but has an office in Sangamon-on-Main, Threat Tech. And they are using our printers to do prototypes of masks, and are making great progress on that. And I believe, Megan, that your husband is involved in kind of testing those and being the medical expert on that end. So great partnership. And otherwise, they were sitting idle in our buildings, and just felt that was one small way we could contribute to the greater good. So
yeah, no, Michael is working, and thank you very much. The addition of those printers was really great. I think we've got some nice ingenuity coming out of this, and
yeah,
there's any glass half full perspective at all on this, is that some really great ideas are coming out of this, and people are putting their talents to work here to help our healthcare professionals locally. It's awesome.
Cool. Anything else under the list of things we're doing?
I just want to add, we do have one of our social workers that has dedicated kind of her skill set to the social emotional health of our staff. Okay. And I think that's a wonderful thing. She put out a great newsletter today, and So I'm just really proud of the work of Rachel at the high school. And then our high school is also setting up a helpline for our students. And Jared, can you speak to that a little bit, how that came about?
Right, so Mr. Benedict had seen something come across one of my principals association where I think East St. Louis did something similar. And so that it's a hotline that students can text or call, and it rings into a general number. It's not anybody's personal cell phone number. And then whoever's available will get the text message via email or via text, and they can respond. Again, no personal cell phone numbers of our staff are shared to our students. So it's a great way for if there's students having an issue, whether that be from a social aspect or a health aspect, there's somebody they can talk to. And we're happy to share that information with whoever we get in touch with, whether that be a principal or a guidance counselor or a social worker or whoever, just somebody that the kids can talk to.
Very cool. Okay. Anything else on our current response?
I don't have anything.
Okay. Next is financial impact. And some of those pieces, and Heather's here, fresh off her first solo day on the job, and it's good to have her here. I'm sure she'll have every answer we need to know. Part A, paying people. Would you like to explain what's going on there?
Sure. So I forwarded to the board on Friday a joint statement from the Office of the Governor, the IEA, the IMT, the Illinois Association of School Administrators, the Illinois Principals Association, and the Illinois State Board of Education. It covered a number of different aspects of the current situation, remote learning plans, and some different things are covered with that. That remote learning days will count as days of people attendance, and there's some very broad statements about remote learning days. But this joint statement does address also the paying of employees during this time, and it says through the duration of the suspension of in-person learning, all school district employees on the district's payroll will get paid as the school were functioning normally, and they are performing their normal work regardless of the district instructional remote learning plans developed during this time. Normal pay includes salary, hourly, and stipend pay, benefits, and employees will receive full and normal service credit in their pension systems. No district will lose any evidence-based funding as a result of this change. So that actually, this is the second joint agreement that was issued from this group. The first one covered the Act of God days, and then this now covers remote learning days. So that's where we're at with that. And we have a contract with our employees. We also have this money budgeted, and it's the right thing to do under the circumstances.
So basically, the agreement between the governor and the agencies and the unions and everything, aside from it being the right thing to do, says we're going to do. So,
Right.
any questions on that piece?
So is that remote learning days with no expiration date? As long as it keeps
Right.
being kicked down the road,
Yes.
we're covered.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. The next item under financial impact are there places we're saving money during this shutdown, or are there places we're spending money maybe that we're not thinking about?
Well, there are places, and this kind of helped when I went around with Trent to the different principals and everything, because there's some things you don't even think about that you're saving during this time. Obviously, with buses, you're saving transportation, you're saving on fuel, and you're saving on overtime. And then you have the same thing with custodial overtime. So we're saving on that as well. Because obviously we're just paying the regular contractual, even though, some people have asked, but we're just paying the regular contractual amounts. Of course, utilities, because our buildings are not full, so we will be saving some on utilities and supplies. We won't be using as much over this time, obviously. And then we did get news from Arbor, our food service company, that, and this is good, they're not going to bill us as if we were in session, like according to how much we would have spent on the contract. They're going to bill us on what they actually do. So we will save on that as well, on the actual meals that are processed. And then something that I didn't even think about until I met with the athletic director was officials for athletics. They're going to be saving quite a bit on that as well, because they're obviously all of the sports have been canceled at this point. There's just the one thing that we probably will lose a little bit on is pre-K tuition, because obviously we're not going to charge our parents when their kids are not here. That is very minimal though. And right now we're just not billing for the month of April. We're going to wait and see for the month of May. But I have been told there's approximately about 10 children.
It's going to be about $5,000 for April.
Okay. So,
But I mean, the recommended amount of daily time on remote learning days for pre-K is 20 minutes. So obviously that's not near what they're getting here at school. And this is our only tuition-based program. So we feel it's a fair thing to do, is to waive that. And we'll reassess once May rolls around or if we get word on that.
we actually had one parent call and say they just couldn't pay it because of the situation.
Sure.
So I mean, I do not see any impact besides the sales tax revenue that could be impacted. Are we on that one? The sales tax revenue, I wouldn't think it would decrease this much, but for example, it did decrease by 20% for the year because, people are still buying things, just not in the volume that they normally do. Plus we won't be out, hopefully we'll not be out for the rest of this calendar
There are a lot
year.
of stores that are open.
Yes, there's a lot of stores. And doing curbside delivery, I saw where a nursery is actually going to do curbside delivery with plants. I never really thought of that, but so there are things still going on. So even I'd say I'm hoping worst case scenario 20% decrease in the sales tax revenue. We would proportion if I just take that proportionately with the 625,000 that we were expecting to get, we would get 500,000. Now with the field house, the second year, because the first year is already covered within the bond issuance, the second year is 400,000. So what would happen is instead of the 225 that we expected to get for additional projects that second year, that second summer, we would only have 100,000 for the additional projects. So
And that would be if we saw 20%.
Yes, if we saw the 20%.
Which I think is.
Yeah, no, it was just kind of worst case scenario. And figured on, completely shutting down everything for 2.5 months is what I figured it out. Is 20% increase.
So we're not.
Yes, so.
We're not completely shutting down everything for 2 months.
Yes, so.
At least at this point.
So you're thinking the 1% sales tax money will only go down by 20%?
We're thinking worst case.
Yeah, because 20% is about 2.5 months. If you figure it on a 12-month calendar basis. So, if you had absolutely no sales, which we are having, there are sales going on within the community, just not at the normal rate. We should still be able to cover the field house. We just won't have as much for additional projects that next time.
Might we want to look at a 5-year plan rather than a 4-year plan we're thinking of?
Yes, that would cost us an additional. That would end up costing us about an additional 20,000. But
In interest.
How often do we get the sales tax from the county?
Monthly.
So
How far?
we'll be able to track that then monthly. As
Yeah,
we go
to be able
forward.
to-
So if we drop, we'll know what the drop is, say by the end of June, to be able to somehow even be able to forecast even better. I know you're doing the budget now, but
Yes.
then look forward 12 months if it's 6 months of the lowest of the lows.
Yes.
Okay.
So, yes, and yes, I'm continuing as normal, starting the budget. Just in planning as is now, and I'll make changes as I go if needed.
Questions on sales tax?
No, mine's a comment. Thanks, Ken. Mine's a comment. It even has to do with just before now. It's that we continue to try to remind people to buy stuff in Champaign County. I mean, now with this pandemic, people are buying stuff online, but I've not been a big proponent of buying that. I like to do it local because it helps us locally, and I think people lose sight of that for convenience. And I think we need to continue to remind people that countywide sales tax really does help us, and just encourage that. That's all I wanted to say. Thanks, Ken.
And it's jobs in the county too, quite frankly.
So that's my loyalty. Thank you. Go ahead, Ken.
Ken?
Have we executed all the contracts for the summer work yet? Are we already?
Yes.
Yes, they're signed.
Yes.
That happened right after we approved them.
Yes.
But we didn't vote at that meeting to approve them. Right? We never took a final vote at the February meeting.
You voted to approve the bids.
At the February meeting, though, we never took a vote.
We met in March, though.
Oh, was it March?
We met March, whatever.
March, we
9th?
voted to approve the bids.
March 9th, we met.
It was February. This is March. In February,
We had a March 9th board meeting.
Yes, but we didn't vote on the field house on the March 9th meeting.
You did it in February 18th.
And that's when they proceeded to get the bonds and start the bond process.
Yeah, but we had time to do the bonds because we didn't need it right away.
right.
Have our bonds, has Kevin been able to sell our bonds already?
So at the March board meeting, the go-ahead from the board was to look at the 4-year payoff for the bonds, and that is what Kevin Hyde from Steeple has been doing. And I mean, my understanding, we're pretty far down the road on that. Heather, I don't know if you're talking to Kevin.
Yes, we are pretty far down the road on that. We've got the bond insurance, we've got, and he is going out and doing all of his stuff to eventually lock a rate. So yeah, he has already proceeded with that project.
The board approved the bids for the field house on February 18th.
I mean, I know
that is the legal go-ahead of approving the project.
I guess on February 18th, we voted to amend Ken's motion with Merle's amendment, but we never took a final vote.
Pretty sure we did.
I'm
I don't
not
have
sure
minutes in
I
front of me. I was under the impression that we'd already voted on it. We're executing.
Yeah, Don, what was the motion on February 18th?
The motion was to approve the contracts as detailed in the letter from BLE. The motion was approved by yes vote 6-1.
We have
Or
contracts.
mute your keyboarding. Say that again, Don.
The motion was amended by Giles and seconded by Hendricks to approve the contracts as detailed in the letter from BLDD. The motion was approved by yes vote 6-1.
Yes, we for sure voted 6-1 to amend motion to be Merle's motion.
Right, and Merle's motion was to approve the contracts as detailed in the letter from BLDD.
My understanding was we approved that motion and the minutes reflect.
And the minutes were approved on March
We
9th.
wouldn't have signed contracts if we wouldn't.
And did we approve those minutes March 9th?
Yes.
Thank you.
It says we voted on Merle's amendment to do the field house as approved, which is what we did. Ken made a motion.
Have you been thinking since February 18th that we have not approved the field house project?
I have been thinking that since February 18th.
That's not
Because
what I was thinking.
about taking out, approving something before we had money. And so I thought after we took out these bonds in April, that we would finish the voting.
That's not what I thought.
That's not what happened.
Yes, in February, to change Ken's motion to Merle's motion. And I didn't vote on the motion. I even said it in the meeting that we need to vote on the main motion.
Merle's motion was the main motion.
Yeah,
I get amended it back to the main motion.
right.
Ken made a motion, Negan seconded it. And Merle made a motion to amend, and Jeremy seconded it, and we voted. So that vote was Merle's amendment, not the original motion. Need 2 votes to pass the field house through. One on Merle's amendment, and the second on the motion. So because we didn't take that second one, I thought maybe someone had decided to wait, because I did ask why we would do that if we didn't have any money.
I think at that point, the explanation was we needed to go ahead on contracts. And we've got some time on the money and Kevin needed to get to work. I mean, that was always the timeline of the plan.
I guess I'm not confused about it. I thought that we did it, and then we even decided what we weren't going to do. Like we didn't pay for the $40,000 or $50,000 batting cages. So I'm confused as to why there was a question.
You mean you're
After
confused?
a time of further discussion, Mr. Keefe's motion was amended by Giles and seconded by Hendricks to approve the contracts as detailed in the letter from BLDD.
And then we voted on that motion.
And it was a 6-1
Voted on
vote.
that motion.
Yeah.
Right, Merle's motion was, I amend Ken's motion that we approve the contracts as given. And so we voted on that. Do we want to amend what Ken said to instead consider what Merle said? But then we needed a vote. I mean, that's just how it works, but
Well,
it's obviously moot at this point, but like
No,
what the minute says is true. That's what we
I
did.
think we did it correctly. I think we that was even stated by Dawn before we voted on it. What we were voting.
We were voting on the amendment to change Ken's motion to say that we're going to approve the field house as stated. I mean, I'm just saying we didn't vote on it. Obviously, you've already signed all the contracts, so it doesn't matter. The board didn't actually vote on it.
Procedurally, Colleen is right.
I think we were all under the impression we did, Colleen.
I didn't vote that way. I had the same understanding that Colleen did, but again, perhaps it's a moot point, but procedurally, we did not handle that appropriately.
I disagree, but that's just my comment.
Take the show.
I fully understood when we left that night, as I thought everyone else did when we voted, that it was a 6-1 vote, that we had approved the contracts to go forward as they were. So,
That's what I thought.
and it's March 30th. So
So
it's a
that was
point.
my understanding
You've already signed all the
last
contracts.
meeting,
Okay.
but I'd have to review the video to know. Is there any language in our contract that allow us to pull back on any of the projects if we want to?
I haven't done any research on this. I didn't realize this was an issue, so I really don't have any more information on this tonight.
Okay. That's fair.
Had I known in advance this was an issue, I would have been happy to look into it. We were on the phone today with Damien. Could have asked him earlier. I'm confused why we had such a lengthy conversation on March 9th about financing if we weren't moving ahead with this project.
So could we have Heather look into those contracts and find out if we have any flexibility to pull back if we decide we want to?
I would refer to the will of the board about doing that. I mean, I think you've approved contracts, so if we're gonna have that conversation, I would recommend engaging in conversation with our legal counsel as well. Heading down the slippery slope here.
Violate our contracts that we've signed. And my concern is that we have enough money to continue to make our payroll for the next year.
We
Right?
can't use sales tax.
Talk a
money to
lot
pay
about the
payroll.
state.
Yeah, sales tax money has to be for facilities. And honestly, we've already spent money on this, not to mention the fact that the rates are so low right now. I mean, if we don't continue, then we could actually lose money in the situation.
So it costs us more to pull out than
Okay.
Colleen, are you clear on that though? That the sales tax money is only used for facilities. It's not something that can be used for payroll.
No, it cannot be used for payroll.
Totally am. I guess my problem is if we have a loan and we don't get the sales tax money, we still are under an obligation as a district to pay the loan. We would need to move money from something else if the estimate is higher than we think, right? I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen in the future.
Right.
I just know that we've had situations before where the state doesn't pay or the county doesn't pay. And this time we might have the state and the county pay. And so I feel nervous about us taking on additional debt when I'm not sure what's going to happen with our budget. I'm not sure if we're going to get any tier money or if they're going to say, cut your budget by 10%. And then I'm wondering when we get the money to pay off our debt if the sales tax money doesn't cover it. And if the sales tax money doesn't cover it, and we have to take it from somewhere else, something else gets moved. I mean, I understand the buckets, but if the budget gets really cut and we need to move things in a legal way, for me, highest priority is making sure that all of our people get paid. And that's what I'm worried about with an unknown future.
Yeah.
So that's not about the field house at all. It really is not about the field house. It's about taking on additional debt at a time where we're so financially
Uncertain.
That's my only concern is I don't want us to ever say we don't have the money to pay our people.
That's my big concern as well. You know, what we haven't talked about yet in this meeting is a very probable recession that's coming. I feel a little bit like we're buying a new house in 2007. If we're doing this big project, we're taking on this new debt, and there's a recession coming, that really worries me.
I think all of us are concerned about what could potentially happen. But I mean, Heather's run it with a 20% decrease, which I think is pretty much a doomsday scenario. Because that would say we generated zero sales tax money in the county for 2.5 months. And we aren't generating zero. In fact, I think we'll see when the numbers come in, we're generating quite a bit right now. because a lot of the stores are open, whether they're doing curbside or whether they're fully open or whatever they're. So I think 20% is a pretty far out there number.
Okay.
Now,
That's
don't get me wrong, I want to make sure we pay people too. But I think, all we can do is make the best decisions at the time based on the information we had. When most of us realized we were pulling the trigger on Fieldhouse, that was the best decision we had with the information we had. And I think right now, we just need to keep making the best decisions that we can based on the information that we have. The state keeps saying they're gonna pay us. Now, there's no guarantees anywhere in life. There just aren't. But I think right now, for everything we can tell, we're gonna weather this okay. Now, that could change next week. But right now, that's what we know.
Let's ask the bonding agent what the language might be to be appropriate for act of God clauses if the whole bottom was to fall out of everything in the next 3 years.
Okay.
Let's just, there's attorneys who spend a lot of time doing this. Let's ask what that plan would be for the language.
I'll go ahead and I'll talk to Kevin about our options at this point, and then I'll also look at how much we put in so far. And then also, I'm attending a webinar tomorrow on funding during COVID-19, so hopefully find some more information as well. And I did already put in the question, will anything else back, these bonds that are supposed to be paid from sales tax if it's not received. So maybe we will get more information as we proceed.
Heather, is there anything you're hearing right now that's a for sure impact on next year's budget?
On next year's budget, not at this point.
I don't think that, I think it's safe to say that certainly here in Champaign County, we're still wondering about property tax distribution.
Yeah. I think here in Champaign County, we had questions about property tax distribution before this happened.
Yeah, and now we have look at else they're working on knowledge, understandable with, as everybody is. So I mean, that would be one thing I would identify in terms of impact on budget next year's, kind of that whole scenario and whether there's problems and fixed.
On whether receiving it in time or not, or.
Yeah. Yeah. Really get the bills out.
We didn't get our early payments
I think it
last year.
might be good for someone to ask the county, are tax bills going out on time? Is there somebody that can answer that?
Yeah.
Well, I think people's ability to pay their tax bill might be impacted here as well. So I think there's a multifaceted issue here.
Yeah.
I think that's true, certainly. I think certainly if they all go out late, that's a bigger impact. A lot of people are working and their bills are going to be paid. There are some who aren't, and that could be a problem for them.
I guess I'm worried about what's supposed to happen at the same time. Right? Like if the taxes are late, even the way they were this year, combined with if there's a recession and the state pulls back their money, if we have those tax at one time, that's what I'm worried about. Trying to not spend any additional money now so that we're not even worse off. Right? I mean, it would be great. Maybe we'll be a tier 1 school and they'll give us another $500,000 and we will all rejoice. But the governor said in one of his press releases, the budget's out the window. We're going to have to start again. So we're not sure what it's going to look like. And
It's going to be out the window till November.
Is there any update from Chapin on the money that he announced recently?
Yes, so both Sean Wagner and I have communicated with him, and Chapin said he has no indication that the money is not coming. It is currently in the notice of funding opportunities paperwork is still being assembled. This is from Senator Rose. I've asked if there was any mention that these projects were on hold amid the COVID crisis, and was told that the grants unit has not been told to halt any grants. They might be somewhat behind because they're working on small business loans. So the mayor actually talked with Chapin. I only got an email. The result of that was that money is still coming.
Well, that's positive news on the field house front.
Yeah. Chapin also made it, Senator Rose very much wanted to extend his thanks to the board and our staff for all the work over the last couple of days too. So I said I would put that out there, but we did communicate with him about this.
Is there any
Would we
update?
lose?
I couldn't hear it.
I missed that.
Is there any update in the E-rate money, the technology E-rate money?
Jerry's saying no.
Would we lose the $400,000 grant if we didn't proceed with the field house? If we put that on hold, would that be lost?
I don't know the answer to that, but it is, I mean, it's for the field house. I don't know. I have no idea if it would be available later.
I think that's an important thing to know.
I'm not Chapin, but in most grants that I do in my job, you have to spend them the way they were designated or they will not pay them.
Is the question, would it be available in the future?
Yes, that's the question.
Just pull back on our expenses. But we can't. If we sign, we can't do that. But not that we wouldn't do things, that we wouldn't do as many things as we would do if we had more money.
Right.
And worst case scenario, I've never done them, but I will figure out how to. We can, if the county is late, we'll do tax anticipation warrants.
We had those queued up last year in case we needed to do it. We never had to do it.
Thank heavens.
We had them on the launch pad in June. Things like that were not looking good.
The county is known for a year that tax bills go out. You would think they would be ready to do it. The other item we had under financial was impact on plans for next year's staffing.
Well, the staffing plan that was presented, it was February or March, I gotta be honest, it's all running together at this point. You know, as I explained, we were down to the bare bones need in terms of adding staff. The staff that's being added is based on increasing enrollment and class sizes increasing. So we still see the need for that. And of course, we're also faced with the issue of teacher shortage and trying to be in the game early in terms of hiring. So that's where the staffing situation lies. Again, as I explained, we had spent a lot of time talking about the needed staff and really had it narrowed down to what was presented to the board was just kind of the bare bones version of what we needed.
I think one of the concerns is if we hit the pause button on that, not only do we risk not getting the people we need, we also, if we put a pause button on it, we also risk just not being able to find people. Some of these positions are hard to fill. There's been times in the past where the money's come late, and when we go out to try to find the people, they're just not there. So I know there's a concern with that.
So how sure
Okay.
are we tier money will come in? Right, these were under the different tier scenarios. Is there any indication that we're for sure going to get tier money?
What's been stated and what's actually in this joint agreement that I read from earlier is it does say no district will lose any evidence-based funding as a result of this change. And the change that's being referred to is, remote learning and paying our employees even though they're not on the job. So that's actually written into the evidence-based funding law that you're always going to get your base funding minimum. The tier funding every year is part of an appropriation to K-12 education. And prior to the whole COVID-19 crisis, the governor had said that part of our tier money was going to, part of that appropriation was going to be held back depending upon the potential passage of the graduate income tax in November.
Which is one reason we scaled back our numbers, right?
Well, that came out after we had discussed the staffing. So, I mean, the tier money every year annually is always part of just the whole budgeting process. And even if we were functioning under regular conditions and our state legislature were actually meeting, the tier money would still be under consideration anyway. So the tier money is always dependent on how much is decided gets appropriated to K-12 education. So in that context, the tier money can change from year to year, depending on how much is given to that. What you don't go backward in is your base funding minimum. So the staffing that we had proposed to add, some of it was paid for through anticipated tier money. And if you remember, we had a couple of scenarios. One was if we remain in tier 1, and one was if we are in tier 2. And unfortunately, as we all know, that information doesn't come forth until later in the summer under ideal conditions. So that's the fact that we would have an unknown about tier money is not unique to the current crisis.
That's true.
But the current crisis there's no doubt that it could have an impact because they're obviously not even meeting.
Well, and obviously you guys did a great job at planning the staffing and the needs, and no one would argue that. The question is, because this thing happened and none of us can anticipate, there's a lot of government money being spent in response and in anticipation of a recession, which would shrink the amount they give us. So when we had that decision before us, there's a lot of other positions we would like to add, but we don't have the money to do it. I'm wondering if we have the money to add the positions we said. And I certainly don't want to add people, then have more people, then have the budget shrink, and then we have to get, let people go. I'd rather fulfill our obligations to the people we have rather than add new people. And now we have more to pay than we have coming in. So I'm just asking if that's something we need to consider putting a slight pause on rather than go ahead with things we don't know if we have money for. For the people who haven't been hired yet. I mean, if we've hired people, we've hired them, but.
So in case this isn't, if you don't hear it well, I typed the question in. Can you tell us what our carryover fund balance would be for the Ed Fund on June 30th?
All right, something about the ed fund.
Do we know what the,
Carryover fund on the ed fund on June 30th. Like, how much will the ed fund have in it at the end of this school year?
At the end of this current school year?
Yeah, our projected balance is
30th. Yes.
I don't know.
we don't know that tonight, but we can certainly get that.
Do we know what the current balance is?
No, I haven't. I do not know the exact
Okay,
balance.
that's okay. That's okay. Well, I would think that the worst case scenario would be we'd have to spend into our ed fund now in order to.
I know the target is 2 million, and we were right around there, but I can't give the exact amount.
repeat that.
Our target for Fund 10 was 2 million, but I don't know the exact amount, but I know we were around that. We were targeting around the what you guys voted as being stable.
Okay.
Merle and Max, when things were really lean, 8, 9 years ago, did we have to freeze hiring then? How did you guys go about hiring?
Initially, we froze hiring. We did have to go back and reduce some.
Yeah, you cut staff
We
too.
reduced some
Yes.
positions. We did most of that out of attrition. I think, yeah, really most of it.
Yes,
through
attrition.
And in the meantime, until attrition took care of it, to Ken's point, we cut into fund balances. I think that was driven by two things. I think it was initially driven by the board that we're just going to keep doing what we think is the right thing to staff our district for as long as we can. And then there was also a response from the community that the community did not want to see widespread cuts, and wanted us to spend down balances to maintain programs if that's what we needed to do, and that's what we did.
And ultimately, we elected not to cut extracurriculars.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So, having been through this, my perspective is our plan, our staff additions for next year are really pretty modest in compared to what we would really like to do. It was not a spectacular spend all program. It's pretty reserved and calculated. There are positions that we feel we need. And if we put a pause on this at this point, we risk not finding really good people that right now are probably, we have a shot at landing if we're out early.
If my memory is correct, I thought our additions were at about the level of tier 2 funding. And we did not choose to go full 2-1 all in and spend it.
So I would be prone, based on having driven around this track before, to stick with the plan. That's just me, but that's where I'm at.
So, were there any lessons that you would take from those lean years that might apply to us moving forward?
We were down about $4.5 million total over those 4-ish years. So that's a pretty big hit that we took, and we pulled through and survived it. We cut enough. We were in negative balances in some of those years. We weren't back up to budgeted, even budget till after 3 or 4, till what, a year ago, maybe a year or two.
Couple years ago.
So
Probably more than that now.
we pulled through, so we thankfully cut enough that we'll never see the 4 million again. But we've got the cash in the bank today.
I think through that storm, we worked hard not to make fast, harsh decisions. We kind of let things correct over time. We wanted to keep programs and support for our staff the best we could, and certainly for our students and families the best we could. And we took a real long-term approach to it, and realized that short-term, there might be some red ink, and things might not look great. We're still technically, and we pointed this out before, we're still technically on the state watch list. Well, that's because mostly because we spent balances down below what the state recommends. And we've always been comfortable with our balances, and we feel like we're good there. And we felt that was the best thing to do for our community. And certainly the community seemed to agree with that at the time, and I think they still do. They did not want to slash in a bunch of stuff. And we could have and saved our state financial rating. But, those matrices really have been around a long time. I would say they're outdated and don't apply to situations now like they did when they were drafted. That's me. We could all argue that, I guess. But we tried to do our best to hold things steady and correct things over time. And that's what we did.
I just think it's important to remember that we have gone through lean times previously, but we have not gone through anything like what we are going to go through on a global level. This is really unprecedented. And I think caution in the face of knowing that the federal government is not going to have money, the state governments are not going to have money, that it would be prudent to proceed with caution and maybe even be overly cautious in this point in time, because we owe people who are going to count on us to be able to pay them next year to be able to do that. And I do think that we probably are going to have to make some hard decisions. And if we can freeze right now and make some of those decisions a little easier, I would be for that. I think the likelihood that we will not receive the money that we are counting on right now is pretty high. And I have the same concerns that Colleen does about making sure that we fulfill our obligations. And if that means we freeze on hiring right now for one or two positions to ensure that we can make payroll for those people that are counting on us, I think we need to think about that. It's not what we want to do, but I think it's what we should do.
Any other thoughts or questions on that? Okay, so I'm hearing a couple different things here. I'm hearing.
Sorry, Max, I had one more question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I keep forgetting to unmute myself. Do we have a total on all those new staff members that we were planning to add?
We had a total on it. I don't know if we got
278,
278?
278,000.
279.
Which with the tier one, you were getting about 500.
Yeah, that's the tier two scenario.
Tier
which is
two, we
my
got
understanding
under
of-
300.
Yeah. So some of that's through.
That's the net.
That's the net.
Yeah, that's taking into account
Okay, so that's
savings through
270.
retirement and other personnel
Okay.
changes. And that's also an educated guess on what tier two funding might look like.
So it's 270,000 versus a typical ending fund balance in the ed fund of 2 million. So it's
Can I just make just a thought here?
15% of
I
our ed
feel like
fund.
there's a lot of information that we don't have here tonight,
I would agree.
and that it might be a good idea just to revisit this discussion on April 20th and bring back the information that's needed to have a more accurate, I mean, we're like talking really,
I know, where are we at on posting those positions?
oh, they're posted, jobs have been offered,
Mhm.
at least one that I know of. But, you know, we posted those after we discussed this.
Right. No, I would expect they'd be posted.
So do we have, is April 20th and a good amount, is that okay for us to still wait until April 20th to have that discussion?
I can't think of anything that, it would just give time to put together some more financial information that Heather could bring.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to get with the county clerk's office and with the architect and the bonds person to get all the information that you guys.
But in terms of staffing, I don't,
Staffing.
I don't know that, I'm just saying that some questions are being asked tonight, and they're excellent questions, but I don't know that we have the exact answers here, or answers that would lead us to. I think the board's gonna, if the will of the board is to not hire some of these positions, the board has to be comfortable with some pretty large class sizes. And so far, discussions have leaned toward not having that.
Could we agree not to hire any people or make any offers to anyone until after that discussion? If that's going to be on April 20th?
That's up to you guys.
I'm sorry.
That sounds smart.
I've had a freeze. I couldn't hear what was said. I'm very sorry.
I said that's up to the board.
Okay.
You know, I think we risk losing some potentially good people, like, I mean, that's 3 weeks out. I don't know.
Maybe we should talk about it in our study session on the 6th.
There's
we-
2 things I'd like to try to get covered there. What is our agenda for then?
That's the next item on this agenda to talk about.
Okay.
June 6th.
Before we, I don't mind putting this on the April 6th agenda, but if we're going to move to that next agenda item, I just want to make sure too that in the past, when we've purchased fuel, we've done that over contract, I think, and I can't remember if it was done cooperatively with other districts or not, but fuel costs are going to get a lot lower here very soon and have potential for us to lock in some lower fuel costs. So that would be one other place to look at saving some money. I don't know if that's an option at this point in the year.
Well, I'll look into it.
Yeah.
I'll look into seeing how much we can
Good idea.
purchase ahead of time.
I know, yeah. I'm sure Heather knows this, but we're in a co-op on fuel purchases, and of course, we locked what we thought were great prices at the time we locked those prices. I would feel better talking about this April 6th than what April 20th.
That's fine.
Me too.
Okay.
Colleen, did you have something you were going to say?
Well, I was just going to say then that I make a motion that we don't hire any new people or make any offers until after the board has discussed about it.
There's not an action item on the
It's
agenda.
not an action item on the agenda, so we can't actually have a motion. We can have.
But we can make motions on anything in which topic is on the agenda. The law.
That's not what we've been told. I double checked that last time.
You can just agree to.
Yeah, we can agree.
Yeah.
Be directed. Doesn't
Yeah.
have to
I don't
be
think we need a motion. We just tell, if we all agree, then Lindsay's not going to make any offers to anybody.
Right. So let's hold till April 6th.
We agree.
Okay.
And we just said that we
All right.
wanted that to be on the April 6th, which is the next item.
Okay. April 6th agenda. The original plan was to be in closed session that night and talk about some goal setting
Yes?
and also get an update from our attorneys. We can do the attorney update remotely. So I would still like to do that, because I think there's information there that would be good for us to have and for everybody to know. I'm not sure about goal setting. If the sands are shifting and we're not sure what we're going to do underneath our feet.
I think we probably will have other things that we need to maybe discuss on April 6th because things are moving pretty rapidly. And I think just a week's worth of time is going to have significant impact on our climate and what's going on around us. So probably holding that and leaving some room on the agenda for whatever is going to be the hot topic is probably a better use of our time on the 6th.
We've also talked about personnel. And we've also talked about personnel, and we never finished the evaluation of the superintendent.
Well, that was the goal setting piece, and I think we wait on that.
Okay.
But I think Heather can have some answers for us by then on the financial piece. Certainly, we can talk about staffing again. Certainly, we can do the remote update, the remote legal update.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I had to just wrap my head around what you meant. Got it.
Okay. Does that sound like a plan?
So this is next Monday.
Next Monday?
It was a study session.
It was a study session anyway.
Is it at 7 o'clock still? 7 p.m. is what it was originally.
Just, could we start at 6?
Can we start at 6?
I'm good with that.
Same format apparently.
And we'll give some thought whether we need to do the closed session update first and then go into open session, or if we want to do it the other way around. But we'll get that figured out and we'll publish the meeting accordingly. So what gets published matches what we'll do. I think it might be good, since we've got to schedule the closed session call and remote broadcast, it might be best to start with that.
Yeah.
Start with Darcy.
Yeah. And then go into open session. It's also easier, I think, from a logistics standpoint, right, to dial the community in later. Okay. All right. We'll keep looking at that, but that seems to make the most sense to me right now.
Yeah, that sounds good because it also has the advantage that the community, if they were expecting it at 7, it'll be more around 7 that the session would start.
Yeah,
right?
that's true. Yeah, we'll get to that. Yeah, we'll get to that part about 7. I have no idea what our viewership is tonight. I don't know if Jared can.
We were over 60 viewers at one time.
Okay. Well, at one point we had 60 viewers. We've lost a few.
Hanging in there.
So if you're out there in the community, know that we appreciate you and hope you're hanging in there and being safe. Anything else on the April 6th meeting? Dawn, do we have any public comment that we've gotten in? No. We do not. Okay, anything further from board members for tonight?
I would just like to.
Just to thank you for all the hard work for everybody in this crisis. It's really been impressive to see how everyone's come together and worked really hard. I appreciate that.
I don't know if you noticed it, but when Dr. Hall was giving her update, it was like, we met this weekend. We met over the weekend. We met, I know our staff has been working very, very hard, administrators and teachers and to somebody's point earlier, some people are working with kids at home and juggling around that. And yet a lot has come together very quickly. And so please let all of our staff know that we're very appreciative of all that.
They're an amazing group.
Anybody else got anything? Hearing nothing, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
That was Jeremy. Is there a second?
Second.
Hennessy.
That was Merle. Further discussion? All in favor of adjournment, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Thank you, everybody. Be safe.
Thank you.
Take care. Be well.
Thank you.